slightly, so the light wouldn't feel like a weapon, and I backed away one slow step at a time. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and old pine boards. My hand shook just enough to make the pump handle creak louder than usual. I found a metal bowl and filled it with fresh water, watching the surface tremble with my own unsteady breath. I thought about calling someone, about doing something decisive, but the truth was that anything abrupt, voices, engines, a slammed door, could send her bolting into the dark with injury and pregnancy dragging her down. So I chose the smallest, gentlest action I could offer. I carried the bowl back out and set it on the porch edge where she could see it without feeling cornered, then retreated again, keeping my body turned sideways, non-threatening, as if I were just another creature sharing the clearing. Through the window, I watched her hesitate, her head lowered slightly, scenting the air. Her ears rotated, catching every tiny sound, the night insects, the tick of a cooling porch nail, my own careful steps moving away. Minutes passed with the slow patience of the wilderness. Then she moved, gliding forward with that liquid grace big cats never fully lose, even when they're hurting. She drank without rushing, tongue quick, swallowing in measured pulls. The way she drank told me she'd been thirsty for longer than she should have been. When she finished, she lifted her head and looked toward the cabin. Her breathing turned ragged, and a shudder went through her shoulders like a wave passing under black fur. She wasn't asking for affection. She wasn't pleading in any human way. But there was something in her stillness that felt like a question. Will you let me exist here for one more night without harm? I didn't open the door. I didn't step out and make promises I couldn't keep. I simply stayed quiet, letting the cabin remain what it was, a place with light, with water, with no sudden violence. After a final look, she eased backward, melting into the trees until the clearing held nothing but tracks, a half-empty bowl, and the echo of my own heartbeat settling down. I stood there a long time after she vanished, realizing that sometimes the bravest kindness is restraint, choosing calm over control, and letting a wild, frightened mother decide when it's safe to trust. Mist moved like slow breath between the pines the evening she came, and the cabin felt smaller than it ever had. I'd been out there for weeks as a caretaker, mending storm split rails, checking the generator, keeping the old place from slipping into disuse, and the forest had become a kind of steady companion. It had patterns I trusted. The scratch of squirrels in the eaves, the thin whistle of jays, the nightly hush that settled after dusk like a blanket. But that night, the quiet was sharpened, as if the whole ridge had decided to listen instead of speak. When I stepped onto the porch with a lantern, the beam found a ring of tracks, circling the steps, pressed deep into the wet soil. They weren't the messy scuffs of a curious raccoon or the blunt stamps of a bear. They were round, heavy, and soft-edged, the signature of padded feet carrying serious weight. I crouched and held the light low, studying the spacing, the way the prints overlapped where the animal had paced. A big cat walks like water, even when it's deciding something hard. These tracks told me she'd lingered, turned, doubled back, as if she couldn't commit to coming closer or leaving. My first instinct rose fast and automatic. Get inside, bolt the door. Don't make yourself part of a predator's decision. I'd seen mountain lions sign before, and heard their scream echo off distant rock like a human voice in pain. But the air around these tracks carried a different tension. Closer, heavier, full of the quiet I couldn't reason away. Beyond the clearing, a branch snapped, and my pulse answered it, loud in my ears. At the tree lean, darkness shifted, not wind, not shadow, but a body separating itself from the night. She stood half behind a cedar, black coat swallowing the lantern glow, so completely she looked carved out of absence. Then her eyes caught the light. A muted gold reflection, steady and unblinking. A black panther, melanistic, real, not the kind of thing you expect to meet at the edge of your porch. In other worlds, she would have been sleek power, muscle, and confidence. Here she was narrow through the ribs, shoulders sharp beneath her fur, and her belly hung low with pregnancy, heavy enough that her stance trembled with effort. She held herself with the dignity of a wild animal that refuses to collapse until the last possible moment. I waited for the familiar sequence, ears pinning back, body lowering. The slow forward creep, that means you've been sized up as food or threat. But she didn't stalk. She didn't rush. She simply stood there as if she'd run out of options, the forest behind her offering no shelter that felt safe anymore. The wind drifted across the clearing and brought the metallic thread of blood, faint but unmistakable beneath the scent of damp needles and cold earth. It tightened something in my chest, because hunger has a smell too, and this wasn't it. This was injury. This was need. For a long moment, we watched each other, without moving. Her tail hung low, not flicking with irritation, just resting like a weight she didn't have the energy to lift. She shifted once, carefully, and the movement looked protective, like she was guarding pain somewhere in her body, while also guarding the life inside her. I could see her breathing in the slight rise and fall of her flanks, and I noticed the rhythm was uneven, shallow, as if every breath had been negotiated. She was close enough that I could see the subtle texture of her coat, where the lantern caught it, a dark sheen like wet stone, and still, she did not come closer. It felt less like a standoff and more like a boundary she was too exhausted to cross. Fear sat in my throat, but something else sat beside it. An awareness that this animal was making a choice that went against every instinct she'd been born with. Wildcats avoid humans because surviving depends on distance. For her to stand at my tree lean meant the deeper forest had become more dangerous than I was. That realization changed the shape of the moment. It made me careful in a different way. Instead of stepping forward, instead of trying to claim control of the scene, I lowered the lantern.